You're sitting at your desk, a notification chimes on Slack, a message from your manager. It's an invite to a spontaneous 15-minute sync, but the description is blank. Your stomach drops slightly, but you tell yourself it's nothing. When you join the call, your manager isn't looking at you. They're looking at a split screen on their monitor. They ask you a highly specific question about how you handled a rare problem 6 months ago, typing out your answer word for word as you speak. You think you're being praised for your expertise. You're not. You're training the thing that's replacing you. Nobody is going to sit you down and say, "We're automating your role." That would be too obvious, too risky, too easy to see coming. Instead, it happens in small requests, quiet meetings you're no longer invited to, a new hire with a title nobody can quite explain, a manager who used to ask what you think and now only asks what the numbers say. By the time most people notice, it's already too late to change the outcome. The decision was made months earlier in a conversation you weren't part of. Here are 7 psychological signs your job is being quietly prepared for automation. Not the obvious ones, the ones hiding in plain sight. Your director walks by your desk, coffee in hand, completely relaxed. They lean against your cubicle wall and smile. "Hey, you're by far the most efficient person on this team. Could you do me a favor and map out a step-by-step blueprint of how you handle things? Just for the new hires, in case you're ever out." You feel a surge of pride. Your hard work is finally being recognized as the gold standard. You spend the next few days pouring your tribal knowledge, the nuance, the shortcuts, the instincts you built over years into a beautifully formatted document. You send it off. Nobody comments on it. It just disappears into a folder. Here's what actually just happened. This isn't an honor. It's a foreclosure on your intellectual property. That document isn't a backup plan for your vacation. It's a specification. Every judgment call you just wrote down, the thing that made you valuable, has now been reduced to a checklist. This is the exact process every automation project starts with. Translating a human's tacit knowledge into explicit steps so it can be copied, trained on, and repeated without the human attached to it. Why does this work on us? Humans are hardwired to crave validation within a hierarchy. When an authority figure frames a request as proof of your superiority, your ego drops its defenses. You hand over your leverage willingly, because the dopamine of being praised blinds you to the vulnerability of being duplicated. And here's what it costs you. Your value quietly drops from irreplaceable expert to legacy data source. The document becomes the standard reference. New hires get pointed to it instead of to you. Being asked for your input becomes optional. You go from need to have to nice to have. So what do you actually do here? Don't refuse to write it. Refusing signals panic, and panic reads as guilt. Write the document, but change what it represents. Frame it as freeing up your time for higher leverage work, and make it clear that the exceptions still need a human. Something like this. I've mapped out the baseline protocol so the team has a standard template. Moving forward, I can use the time saved here to focus on the high-level exceptions and edge cases that keep our error rates low. Most people hand over the keys to their kingdom just to hear a thank you. The ones who last are the ones who use automation to offload their administrative tasks, positioning themselves as the manager of the workflow rather than the worker inside it. That's 1 down, 6 to go. And this next one is harder to catch because it doesn't happen in front of you at all. You hear about it after the fact. "Oh, we had a quick sync about the reporting workflow." You weren't in it. Nobody looped you in. When you ask what was discussed, the answer is vague. Just some process stuff. Nothing major. Except it is major. It's about you, just not with you. Exclusion from a conversation is information. When decisions about your function start getting made in rooms you're not in, it means your presence would slow the conversation down because you'd naturally push back. Nobody wants to have the, "Are we still evaluating whether this needs a human?" conversation with the human sitting right there. This works because of something called diffusion of responsibility. If 5 people quietly discuss a change to your role, no single person has to feel like they made the call alone. It becomes the team's direction instead of someone's decision to replace you. And while that conversation keeps happening without you, the decisions inside it start to calcify. By the time you hear the outcome, it's already being presented as final. You've been quietly moved from producer to spectator. Don't demand a seat at that table out of insecurity. That reads as territorial, and territorial people are easy to route around. Instead, offer something they actually need, your ground-level data. Try this. I heard we're looking at some process optimizations for the reporting workflow. I'd love to join those syncs moving forward. I can bring the ground-level data to ensure any new systems integrate smoothly without disrupting our current output. Demanding entry based on ego causes friction. Offering entry based on making their project successful turns you from a roadblock into an indispensable implementation partner.
It starts as a reorg. Your job, which used to be one flowing responsibility, you owned the relationship start to finish, gets divided. Someone else handles intake now. Someone else handles reporting. You just handle communication. Everyone frames it as specialization. More focus, more efficiency, they say. But your job wasn't simplified for your benefit. It was decomposed into modular tasks. And modular tasks are exactly what gets automated first. A role that requires complex judgment across many moving parts is incredibly hard to replace. A role broken into 5 discrete, well-defined tasks is 5 separate automation opportunities. The trap here is that fragmentation often feels like relief, not danger. That comfort is exactly why people miss it. Nobody feels threatened by a narrower job description until each fragment quietly gets benchmarked against a tool built to do exactly that one task, all day without fatigue. You become one node in a pipeline instead of the person who holds the whole picture. And a single node is always replaceable because it's always losing the comparison to software designed for precisely that node. Don't fight the specialization or try to act as a bottleneck to slow it down. Step above the pipeline instead. Use the fragmentation to become the connective tissue that translates the separated data points into business strategy. For example, now that intake and reporting are streamlined, I'm seeing some interesting discrepancies between the raw data and actual client sentiment. I'm going to start providing a quick weekly synthesis to ensure these newly separated pieces still align with our overarching strategy. A role that touches one thing gets quoted a price. A role that connects disconnected pieces to hold the whole picture survives, because connective tissue is the hardest thing to automate. We're at the halfway point, and this next sign is the one most people mistake for flattery. Someone new joins with a vague, unplaceable title: Process Optimization Lead or Operations Enablement. They ask a lot of questions. They shadow your meetings. Or maybe it's not a person at all. You're leading a high-stakes call, and notice an uninvited name sitting in the participant list. No camera, no face, something like Productivity Bot Alpha. Your manager looks completely unbothered. Either way, that presence exists to study your workflow and identify what can be automated. Companies rarely announce, "We hired a tool to evaluate replacing parts of this team," so it gets a neutral name. Whether it's a person or software, it's parsing your phrasing, your shortcuts, your instincts, mapping the parts of you that used to be uncopyable. Humans normalize surveillance quickly once it's framed as just a tool or just standard onboarding. Your natural paranoia gets disarmed, and you perform naturally, unwittingly handing over the exact material being used to build your replacement. The danger is that decisions about your function get made using an incomplete picture, assembled by someone with a few weeks of observation, not years of doing the job. That thin, context-free data is what leadership ends up acting on.
If it's a human shadow, don't be evasive. Become their primary consultant so you control what they actually find. You could say, I love that leadership is looking into optimizing this workflow. To get you the highest quality data, let's set up a quick 15-minute sync where I can map out the complex edge cases that usually bottleneck this process. If it's an AI system sitting in on your calls, don't fight the technology out of fear. Lean on something the company already respects: risk, privacy, and compliance. Try just a quick heads up on compliance. Before we dive into the client's proprietary financials, I'm going to pause the AI assistant to make sure we don't trip any data privacy agreements. I'll manually synthesize the safe takeaways for the team afterward. The moment you spot an observer, don't panic. Become the director of the study and frame the technology itself as a liability that requires your human oversight.
It's subtle. It used to be, what do you think we should do here? Now it's just, send me the numbers. The conversations that used to involve your opinion now only involve your output. You're still busy, still producing, but something has quietly been removed from the relationship: your interpretation. When someone stops asking for your judgment, they've usually already started forming judgments elsewhere. A dashboard, a report, or a new analytics tool now performing the interpretive function you used to provide. You've been repositioned from advisor to data source. Judgment is the single hardest thing to automate. So the moment an organization stops asking for yours, it usually means they've found a substitute for it. This is one of the clearest tells of all 7, precisely because it doesn't feel like a demotion. It feels like being trusted to just handle it. But your value narrows to your raw output, the most commoditized, most replaceable part of what you do. Once you're seen only as a number producer, you're being measured against anything else that can produce that number faster and cheaper. So never stop at the raw output. Reinsert your judgment even when nobody explicitly asked for it. Don't just send the numbers, anchor them to a decision. Try numbers attached. I ran a quick cross-analysis against the recent pricing changes. The data shows a temporary dip rather than a drop in true demand. Let me know if you want me to map out our mitigation options for next week's sync. Reporting gets automated. Advising survives. Refuse to be a data courier. Be the strategist who tells the company what the data actually means. 2 signs left, and the next one usually feels like the nicest thing anyone said to you all quarter.
Can you walk the new tool through how you handle exceptions? Or can you get the new hire up to speed on your edge cases? You agree, because refusing feels petty, even hostile. It's framed as mentorship. It feels like being valued. But sit with what's actually being asked. You're being asked to transfer the hardest won part of your expertise: the exceptions, the anomalies, the instincts that only come from years of experience, into something that will still exist after you're gone. This is often the final step in making your current role optional. This one works because of reciprocity and pride. Someone asking to learn from your expertise feels like validation, not extraction. That's exactly why it works so well. It never announces itself as a threat. Once your edge cases are captured and fed into the system or a cheaper hire, the gap between you and the automated workflow closes completely. There's very little left that only you can do. Don't refuse to train it. Refusal burns trust instantly and marks you as obsolete. Instead, hand over the repetitive, high-volume material freely and use the moment to formally establish a new role for yourself: the person who audits the anomalies. Something like, I'll map out the standard resolutions so the new tool or hire can handle the volume autonomously. For the complex anomalies, I'll set up an escalation protocol where I step in to audit the outliers so we keep the system running cleanly without quality drops. Handing over a list of exact resolutions for every past exception builds your replacement. Standardizing the volume while positioning yourself as the quality assurance layer above the system is what ensures your longevity.
You start hearing your job described differently. Not, she handles client relationships, but she's the interface between the client and the internal system. Not, he makes the final call, but he validates the output before it goes out. At first, it barely registers. It's just how people talk now. But listen closely to that shift. Words like interface, validate, process, throughput, that's not how people describe irreplaceable judgment. That's how people describe a component, a step in a pipeline. Language shifts before structure does, because words are how organizations mentally recategorize a human into a process step, making an eventual replacement feel entirely logical. This is the quietest sign of all 7, because it doesn't come from an overt request. It just slips in, one meeting at a time, until replacing a step in a pipeline stops feeling like replacing a person. It starts feeling like optimizing a workflow. And by the time the actual restructuring is proposed, it feels completely inevitable to everyone in the room, because they've spent months already talking about your role like a software function, without realizing it. Don't fight a semantic war by correcting their grammar or acting overly sensitive about your title. Adopt their system language, but tie it immediately to something they can't automate away: client retention, quality, revenue stability. For example, exactly, I'm managing the validation phase, specifically looking for the qualitative nuances that keep our client retention high, even when the data looks perfect on paper. Language built the case against you quietly. By steering their system language toward economic value and human nuance, you can rebuild the case for yourself just as quietly. That's all 7. None of these signs, on their own, prove anything. A documentation request is sometimes just documentation. A new hire is sometimes just a new hire. That's exactly what makes this dangerous. Every individual sign is entirely deniable. It's only when you see them stacked together, layered over months, that the pattern becomes unmistakable. What connects all 7 is the same quiet truth. Organizations rarely announce a replacement. They prepare for one, piece by piece, meeting by meeting, sentence by sentence, until the decision has already been made in every way except officially. The corporate machinery doesn't hate you. It's simply indifferent to you. It runs on the cold logic of optimization. And optimization requires predictability, a game humans lose the moment they let themselves become predictable. The people who get blindsided aren't the ones who did bad work. They're the ones who mistook silence for safety. The people who navigate this well aren't paranoid. They've simply changed their relationship to technology. They don't fight the tool. They position themselves to own it. So the next time you're asked for a blueprint, moved off the main thread, or invited to a meeting with a blank description, don't look at it through the lens of routine. Look at it through the lens of strategic survival. Now that you know how to read the signs, you can't unsee them. If you spotted one of these 7 happening to you right now, tell me which one in the comments. And if this helped you see your workplace differently, subscribe, because the sequel to this covers the exact counter strategies that actually get people promoted instead of automated.